Ready to go, Adam? Thank you very much. Okay, folks, if we could get to our seats, we'll get started. Couple more to make their way in. I think everybody's here. All right, we will call the Regional District Okanagan-Snokemeen regular board meeting to order. But before we get started, I would just like to take a moment for the board to remember Director Knodel. So we'll give a moment of silence, please. Okay, thank you for that. Our agenda this morning, we do have the opportunity to remove anything off the consent agenda if somebody has anything they want to discuss in the regular part of the meeting. Not seeing anything there. Looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved, seconded, thank you. All in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to the consent agenda, corporate issues. Looking for a motion on that, please. Move, seconded, thank you. All in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to development services, building inspection. Item B1, building.
Chair, sorry, I need to recuse myself. Conflict
By
of
all
interest.
means. Okay, thank you. Go to the CAO on this one, as Director Fedrigo is stepping out. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek direction from the Regional District Board regarding enforcement against the property owner of 2844 Gannon Road, legally described as Lot 2, Plan 44573, District Lot 207. And the administrative recommendation is that a notice of title pursuant to Section 302 of the Local Government Act and Section 57 of the Community Charter made applicable to the Regional District by Section 302 of the Local Government Act be filed against the title of land described as Lot 2, Plan 44573, District Lot 207, due to certain works having been undertaken on the lands contrary to the Regional District Board Building Bylaw 2805-2018, and that injunction action be commenced against the property owner if after January 23rd, 2025, the property is not in compliance with the Regional District Okanagan-Snokemeen Bylaw 2805-2018. Staff's here to answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you. And I'll go to Director Bloomfield. I'll speak then on your behalf if you would. You needed to recuse yourself as well on this one? Okay, thank you. We'll let you know when this is dealt with then. Is everybody else's microphones functioning? Just quick. No. Maybe we've got some technical problems here. Before we get too far along. Maybe it's just an on button that never got hit on all of them. I'll just give everybody a second to get their mics prepared here. And I would just ask, is there anybody willing to move this motion? Director Monteith is moving it. Is there a seconder for it? Thank you. It's on the floor. As soon as we get the mics on, I'll ask if there's any discussion on this. Okay, that's a good point. This is an opportunity usually to ask the owner or applicant if they are in the room or online, if they want to speak to this. I don't see anybody in the room. I'm going to just check with Adam if there's anyone online. I'm not seeing any raised hands on my screen, but no? Okay, owner or agent is not in or online. Any discussion on this? Not seeing any. I will call the question. This is a corporate vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. And if I could ask someone to just let Director Federico and Director Bloomfield know they're welcome back in. And we'll move on to the next one, which is C1, petition to enter the service area in Area D, CAO.
Thank you, Chair. The applicant has submitted a petition request to the regional district that seeks to include an addition 33.6 hectares of the property at 1655 Maple Street, which is legally described as Lot D, Plan KAP 22642, District Lot 551 in the Okanagan Falls Water Service area. And the recommended motion is that the Okanagan Falls Water Service Establishment Bylaw 2978.02, 2024 be adopted. Staff's here to answer questions.
Okay, I'll go to Director Taylor to get direction on this.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Okay, you're moving it. Is there a seconder? It's on the floor. Thank you. Any discussion on this one? Not seeing any hands. Again, corporate vote. I will call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to C2, allocation of provincial SSMUH fundings, CAO.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to outline options for the board in relation to the allocation of the provincial funding to assist with the implementation of the legislative requirements related to small-scale multi-unit housing. And the recommended staff motion is that the allocation of the remaining grant funding received from the Ministry of Housing in support of the small-scale unit housing implementation be allocated to development service cost charges bylaw review.
Okay, direction from the board on this or any questions? Director Federico is moving it. You're seconding it. It's on the floor. Any discussion? Quiet bunch here this morning. Again, no hands. And this one is again a corporate vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Over to C3, a land use application notification during postal stoppages. CAO.
Thank you. The proposed amendment to the development procedure bylaw is intended to facilitate the process of certain land use applications during the postal work shortage. And the recommended motion is that the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen Procedure Amendment Bylaw 2500.37, 2024 be read the first, second, and third time and be adopted. And again, staff's here to answer questions.
Okay. Direction. Anybody prepared to move this one? Moved. Is there a seconder? Thank you. Any discussion? Director Coyne, Senior, go ahead.
If staff has a report to put out there, could we hear it?
I can just hear you now. Go ahead.
If staff has something to say on this, could we hear it?
I will
CAO
double.
said there was something there that.
Mr. Garish?
Sure, thank you through the chair. So no formal presentation per se, but it was a committee previously. We recognize our timing is a bit off with the announcement to resolve the strike, but we anticipate in future this may occur again. And so to have provisions in place at that time to help us proceed with land use applications, we're recommending in support of the changes to the amendment bylaw, but recognizing that with the current state of affairs, they're probably not applicable at the moment.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, this one is a rural vote. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to Protective Services, 2025 Transforming Systems Grants, CAO.
Thank you. So the funding is designated to support operational costs, including salaries and benefits, to sustain or expand initiatives extended to combat poverty, exploitation, and migration. That the board approve submitting a grant application for a 2025 Transforming System Grant in the amount of $300,000 over a 3-year period. Staff is here to answer any of your questions.
Okay, direction, you're moving it? Moved, seconder, thank you. Any discussion? Director Taylor, go ahead.
Is this for a position that was previously looked at in part, correct?
Go
Yes.
ahead.
Okay, I'm just wondering why we didn't apply for the funding or consider the funding
In
earlier.
advance, we'll check with staff.
So staff just became aware of this in late December. So as soon as we became aware of it, we went, well, let's see if the board would like to go for this.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? Not seeing any hands. So again, corporate vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. D2, Fire Protection Agreement between the RDOS and the City of Penticton, CAO.
Thank you. I am pleased to present this report. It's a cooperation between the City of Penticton and the Regional District. The purpose of the Rural Fire Protection Service Agreement between the City of Penticton and the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen to provide first responder services and fire suppression services to the West Bench Fire Protection Area. And the recommended motion is that the board approve the fire protection service agreement between the City of Penticton and the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen. And again, staff's here to answer any questions.
Okay, I will go to Director Gettin's direction on this one.
Thanks. I'll move the recommendation, please. Thanks.
Okay, you're moving it, seconded, it's on the floor. Any discussion? Not seeing any hands. Again, this one is a corporate vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Brings us down to finance, the 5-year financial plan, CAO.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. It wasn't that easy to let go, but I did let go. And those of you that don't know, Wayne is the deputy CFO, and he is going to be presenting the 2025-2029 financial plan. And with that, I'll just read the administrative recommendation, not to consider until after the presentation. And the administrative recommendation is that the change requested as listed in the Appendix 1 and 2 of the January 9th, 2025 Regional District 2025 to 2029 5-year financial plan bylaw 3102-2025 administrative report be approved. Further, that the board direct staff to adjust the budget for the second reading to reflect changes as directed by the board. And further, that bylaw 3102-2025 being a bylaw for the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen to adopt the 2025-2029 5-year financial plan be read a first time. And Wayne is here with the presentation. Wayne, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, go ahead, Wayne.
Okay, thank you. Let's get Adam to bring up the presentation here. All right, so this first one here is the overall after non-market growth is 4.88%. Appendix A references the changes requested from the workshop. And we'll go through the summary of the slides that each request and by tax implication. So the regional grant and aid, there was multiple asks, and there were 4 that were supported by the board. So that's what that works out to. And this is the impact of those grant and aid requests to each area. full-time equivalents. There was multiple that were accepted. 11 and 12 were accepted at an earlier meeting. And we are asking that the utilities coordinator and solid waste operations manager get early approval. This is the impact for the park's lead hand by area.
Why the hell would we have that?
The bylaw coordinator, it's a 0% because it's offset by the fees.
You've got a question as we're going here, Director Roberts, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair. Just was okay, we just step back about the, you said the allocations in regards to a park person working. How does that work when you don't have a park service? I'm just wondering whether or not, because Area G doesn't have a park service at all.
It's
So
regional trails. You pay for regional trails through Area
pay for
G,
regional trails, but not parks.
right? But that park's lead hand, some of his work is in regional trails, and the amount that is in regional trails has to be redistributed to everybody in the region.
Fair enough, thanks.
And so that's where you're.
Okay. Another question here. Go ahead, Director Conant.
Yes, thank you. I was curious, and you may have answered this in a previous meeting, so I'm sorry if I'm asking it again, or I've heard you already answered this question. But in the bylaws, in the bylaw position, excuse me, it's covered by fees. What happens if the fees don't cover the bylaw coordinator's position for that year? Just because there may be some that are not using a bylaw officer, it might not be something they need that year. What happens if we're short for the salary of the bylaw court officer?
The CAO will answer that.
I'll go to the CAO.
So I guess I'm not out of it. So if we did our job right, staff came with a recommendation of business licenses at $500 per license per year. If we did our job right, it should be cost neutral. Regional districts and other local governments aren't allowed to make a profit, as you may know. We also don't want a loss. Ultimately, if we have a deficit under the Local Government Act, we'd have to the deficit would be carried forward the following year, and the rates for the business licenses would come to the board to be adjusted accordingly.
So it would still come out of the service participants'
Thank you.
areas and fees in some way or form. Go ahead, Wayne.
So sustainability manager, this was part funded, and so we're asking for some not to be funded, and that's what the impact would be. We removed the FTE9 as because we accepted the program change request for removing recreation. We no longer were able to have a zero impact to tax reclamation with a new role, so we just removed the role. Solid waste operations manager. And then your FTE 11 and 12, which were accepted on October 3rd. So then we went through the program change requests, which were accepted.
Okay, got a hand here. Director Coyne, go ahead.
Solid waste operation, is that, I'm guessing this is a regional thing, but why is it not participant?
CAO? Can we go back to that one? What?
When you mean participant, you mean for the vote? Or
No, for the taxation on it. You got solid waste operations manager, and you have communities that don't run their own landfill, like Summerland, Princeton, Oliver, and Asuyas, and we're paying into a manager of solid waste when we already have our own solid waste people.
Well, there is a service that is required under legislation that we all of the electoral areas have to be in, and the municipalities, and that's the part where they're working, and that's, exactly, it's
4,300
solid waste management. So that's something that it's a bylaw that says you all have to participate and agree. So there's a component of that positions in that service establishment bylaw. And we did do some research on it, and that's something that you can't opt out of. It's a legislative requirement from the province.
And that's just a portion of
Yes.
their wages? It's not the
No,
entire?
no, it's a portion.
Okay. Any other questions before we continue to move on? Continue, then go ahead, Wayne.
The program change requests. So with recreation removal, the 3 areas are E, F, and I that are affected, and it's a decrease. Emergency management area H, they're the only ones affected. Invasive tree programs, only area F. Parks and trail maintenance, that's split out there. Turf management is only area E. Website redesign is funded through reserves, no direct tax implication. BC Tree Fruits is going to be funded through 7890 Heritage Conservation Fund, and we're using reserves, so there is no impact to tax requisition. And this was decreased to a year of storage at $130 a month. The capital funding request, we removed the purchase of the 1-ton emergency planning vehicle as directed by the board. We decreased curb stop program in Willowbrook Water by $30,000 as requested by the director, and decreased community funds gas tax from the Armada Fire as per the director. Early approvals they were looking for are for utilities coordinator and solid waste operations manager, which I believe have already been granted, and for recreation removal so that the recreation can get their advertising out and it's correct for the year.
Okay.
Appendix B lists reserve adjustments that had to be made in order to get the reserves on side. So there's quite a few of the changes. Most of them are from 26 to 29. There's not too many in 25. So I don't know if you guys want to go through each one of these slides or just.
Can I interrupt?
Go ahead, CAO.
So one of the things that we did is we looked at the future requests in capital and looked at the affordability. And I came from an area that looked at a 10-year capital plan compared to with a 10-year budget. We don't have that capability, but at least we can look at match 26, 27, and 28, and we did not want to have a negative reserve. We need to make sure that the promises, the goals, the capital projects that we are looking at promising to fulfill does not equate to a zero or a negative reserve. However, one of the things that we need to actually go back and do a better job in, the board accepted a revenue policy that looks at the borrowing. Does the user of today pay, user of tomorrow pay, or a combination of both? And that's something we got to do a better job at, because we need to come to the board, and in some cases, you may decide the user of today pays everything. In other cases, the user of tomorrow pays, or in another one, half and half. And currently, the way that it's doing it, the majority is that the user of today pays. And if we change, philosophy changes, the reserve policy then will be adjusted and you're not going to be into a negative. But right now, the way that it stands, the way that finance did the budget, we can afford it. We've got the money in there, but you've got the wiggle room in the future to change and apply a revenue policy where for municipalities, it's the law. They have to have the revenue policy attached to the board, to the budget, and the CFO for the local governments, if they're doing their job the way they're supposed to, should actually have a report that says we've done this. We don't have to, but we should.
Okay. I'll just let you continue moving
So
through.
I don't know, there's quite a few slides. I don't know if you want to talk on each one or just, because this is in the package, I don't know if you guys looked at it or not.
If it's in our package, I can't speak to whether everybody's looked at them, but I'm sure the majority have. But a question, Director Bush?
Yes, so our fire chief indicated that he was short. They made some kind of mistake on wages or something, so they wanted to increase the budget. Is that included in here?
Yes, it's on Appendix C.
Okay. So we'll watch. That's the next appendix we'll be going through. So.
Or
Okay.
sorry, it might be, it's D, because Appendix C is wages. So wage reallocation, this is Appendix C. So the mandate was that each service pay for themselves and not be subsidized. So as such, we had to pull wages out of general government and electoral admin that had historically been in there and had to redistribute them into the service areas. Also, there was capital projects, which we moved wages from operating into capital to cover those wages in there. And then our system does not allow us to protract out 5 years for wages. It's once we set the percentages, it's for that year. So we had to adjust 26 to 29 in the capital when there was no projects. So that's what this section does.
Okay.
So this, as you can see, these first ones for the roles, there was no change in 25, but the changes were in 26, 27, 28, and 29 to adjust where those people are projected to work in those years.
Okay. Director Roberts, question?
Thank you, through the chair. In going through these appendixes, they seem to all be union positions. I didn't come across, and I was trying to find a line, and I wasn't sure if it was in Appendix C in regards to the managing directors, because I've been trying to hunt and peck and find out where that fit in my salaries and wage
Well,
lines.
the managing directors were new this year and they were included in the wage allocation at the start. So that's why there has been no adjustment to their wage allocation. And their wage allocation was based on the service areas that they cover, and then it was prorated throughout those.
Okay. So it was the original allocation. There was no reallocation.
Yeah, there's
So
no
they're not
change
in
from
list.
the workshop budget. This is just the changes from the workshop budget that you received.
Okay. That makes it a little clearer. Thanks. Any other questions? Director Monteith?
Thank you, through the chair. Maybe I'm the only one, but I don't know what 3401 is or 3916. I'm feeling really lost when I'm asked to look at a budget and I don't know what accounts those are. So how do I find that?
Well,
Ask Wayne.
yeah, in your Appendix F, you have a list of which accounts are for your electoral area. So that's one way to do it. I can improve this by adding naming of what those accounts are for next time.
It would probably be beneficial
That'll help,
to
yeah.
everybody to have a name there as well as just a number.
For sure.
A little more work to
I
get
can do
it
that.
started, but
Yeah, thank you for the input. I definitely like to make it better for you guys.
okay.
So this project coordinator one here, they had wages in operational that were moved to capital. So that's what the 2025 adjustments were. And then these were to take the wages out of general government and electoral area. So as you can see, there was quite a few changes.
Mm-hmm.
Whoops, sorry. That last one, I went too far. What happened? Oh, this is D, sorry. Heavy-handed button. This one here was just to change Shinnish Creek from rural projects into the actual Shinnish Creek service in 2025. Then we've got the JEP increase. And then we had to add the rec coordination role back into EF and I as it was taken out in the program change request.
Remind me what JEP is?
A job evaluation program something.
Okay, so it wasn't just me.
No.
I can't remember what that acronym
So
stood for.
we checked to make sure that each of the roles are what the industry standard would pay.
Okay. Go ahead, CAO.
What JEP does is it looks at the job that is required from the union member and evaluates what the wage should be based on what's out there market.
Okay. Director Roberts.
Sorry to staff, through the chair. So in parentheses, I'm assuming that's a negative. So does that mean that we're paying less than what's considered versus what's the average norm?
For in this instance, like when we look at the recreation coordinator, Similkameen Rec is 7,200, Similkameen Pool is 7,310, and Area F is 7,570. So in the workshop budget, they had already taken out the rec coordinator from Area F and put it into Similkameen Rec and Similkameen Pool. So we had to remove it from the pool and put it back into recreation to make everything work properly.
Okay.
Appendix D, this is the one where we got the adjustments from the directors or staff. So I noticed when I was going through the analysis of the budget, there was a few formulas that didn't take. And so this is what had to be done to make sure it worked. Those are adjustments from the wages and salaries that had already been done in Appendix C. We had to increase the ask for utilities from 90 to 200,000. That was for the vehicle replacements. It's funded through vehicle replacement reserve, so it's not through taxation. There was an agreement with Penticton for the temporary winter shelters. That was not on the budget for 2025, so we had to add that in. And the funding was through operating reserves. We have a new IT acting manager, and he went through the capital projects that the team had, and he adjusted the carry forward. So that's what these ones here are. Again, it will not affect tax requisition. Through analysis of the budget, we noticed that there was some capital projects, the KVR trestle platform for one that was on the budget, but it shouldn't have been, so we removed it. Same with the Spirit Park development. It was a late carry forward. And then there was a couple projects in Area B that were on the budget, but they were also included in another project line. So we removed the projects that were doubled up. And then Regional Trails had bought two F-150s. One of them was actually being paid through grant funding in 2021. So we were able to decrease the MFA leasing for the Regional Trails for the one vehicle. Regional Transit had some very large discrepancies over the last 3 years, so we had to adjust to more than actual, and I believe Matt Weller is looking into this.
CAO?
So when we talk about discrepancies, the budget for transit comes from BC Transit. It is not us. And what they're saying and what we're getting at the end of the day is not close to what they originally stated. So that's something that the manager is looking at, finding out and complaining of what they need to do a better job.
So the initial estimate from them versus what they're saying now is changed significantly? Okay.
The operational costs that is hitting us hard. And it's not that we don't trust them. It would be nice to see if they can do better on their operational costs.
Okay. Go ahead, Director Barkwell.
So just to make sure I understand this, because I think it might apply to municipalities as well, they're giving a budget estimate that we would all put in our budgets, RDOS and municipalities, and then they send a bill for a different amount.
Correct.
So I haven't heard that at the municipal table that, hey, we've got this discrepancy. I wonder if it's a question I should ask. If it's wrong for the RDOS, it must be wrong for the municipalities too.
It wouldn't hurt to ask that question. I can't speak for other municipalities, but we can speak for us.
Yeah. Okay. Continue on.
So it's for all the transits that we have. This is a request from the director to increase grant and aid and to put some more capital projects on. Area C. So there's a seniors club kitchen, a Fairview parking lot paving, funded out of gas tax, and then 4 grant and aid applications.
Sorry, just to add, I had a meeting with Director Canodal on December 15th, and he was passionate about these asks, and he wanted to make sure that they are included in the 2025 budget.
And then area F is going to FCM in Ottawa, so we had to increase the travel budget. Then electoral area E, there's a cenotaph relocation, and then we also have a 2-year community social development trial that was added on. And then the Similkameen County Visitor Information Center, we had removed their funding, and it was requested that $25,000 be reinstated for 2025. Request from the fire chief. This is the one that Director Bush was talking about. There was a 10% honorarium that was missed, so that was the increase shown there. And then in Caledon, we just had to carry forward the pumper truck because it's not actually delivered yet. And these requests were from the CAO. In order to get the tax requisition down for everyone, when it came to the regional trails, there's a RDOS grant that was approved, and there's a $125,000 RDOS portion, and we're asking that that be funded out of gas tax.
CAO?
So that's the first crack at funding that. The rest, we're going to be re-looking at that before second and third reading to eliminate the gas tax part of it. So I don't want, part of that operational cost is our portion of a grant that we may or may not get. And I find it difficult and very hard to tax our clients for something we may or may not do. So the objective is to try to, if we're going to get it, the money should be there, but it's how it should be there is the question. So that's something that will change by the time it goes to third reading.
Okay, Director Monteith?
Thank you. Through the chair, could I ask which areas gas tax? Because the regional district itself doesn't have gas tax, only electoral areas does. So which electoral area or who is paying into this? And if it's a regional trail, shouldn't the municipalities be as well?
So that's why I made the comment I just did, is because it's not completely fair. Well, it's not fair. Right now, the municipalities will be getting a benefit of doing it this way. So this is just the start. I will commit to you that between Wayne and I and Noel, the CFO, we will look at coming back with something that's fair to all of you. But again, I do not want to tax for something we may or may not do.
So tentatively, that 125 is out of all the electoral areas
Yes,
gas tax?
Correct.
Okay. Technically, okay.
Okay, and then we, to fund the website, we were doing it through reserve. So that was all that showing there. And then this was to carry forward some projects that we didn't catch the first time. This is to change some funding sources. And that's all I have.
Okay, we kind of dealt with questions as we came or went through it, but I'm sure there probably is more as we move along here.
Yeah, can you bring it back up?
Director Roberts.
Thank you through the chair. A lot of the things that, questions are already being taken care of by staff or that I work on or after this meeting. But I think it's important. I find sometimes what's quite confusing is how we allocate names to things. For instance, park and trails, when there's a regional park service and there's people who have park services. And then if you tie in parks and trails and it connects underneath recreation, or you have, it's all these little things, but it makes it really difficult to kind of like follow the trail of the money, like who's what and what does that actually mean. And maybe it's my own ignorance in regards to, I just see it black and white in regards to this service and that service and that service. So, that's something that like I'm hoping that as we move forward, we'll be able to see a little bit more clarity in that in regards to, and I always bring up every year kind of like our rec service is actually Similkameen Rec Facility, and it's not. It's more than that. So those things create confusions and also communication errors in regards to one thing to another. So I'm just hoping we can clear up some of the terminology and naming. Thanks.
Okay. So, Ms. Malden.
Just on that, we had started our parks and recreation and trail service review with Allie Nielsen, and of course stalled because there were several other priorities that the regional district wanted to get forward first. So we're back to that in the next month or so, and all of those funny little phrases and terminologies and confusion, you're not alone. I feel it too, and I deal with these bylaws regularly. So that will all come out in the review, and you can expect as well. We'll be bringing the consultant to the board to gather any questions or suggestions that you may have. So that's coming soon.
Okay, thanks for that, Director Monteith.
Thank you through the chair. I think I'm looking for some support with communication on the budget this year. Area I is unique in that it's got two real fire departments that are, have two separate budgets, but the costs at Apex are really what's driving the 6.6% increase. Caledon itself is probably like not even a 3. So I need help getting that message to the community of Apex, because they're going to be sticker shocked when they get their bills compared to Caledon, right? So I guess how do we make sure that that message is driven home
to the appropriate
Absolutely, because
residents
it looks like all of Area I is getting that, and it's not all of Area I. It's only Apex that's going up that much. So, or if more,
Yeah, the higher portion of the
Absolutely.
average is Apex.
Absolutely, they're going to feel it this year.
CAO or Wayne, I'll let either of you fly at that one.
Well, I guess I can direct this. There was one year where I actually split the tax implications for Okanagan Falls because there was new services. So that's something that we can do for you. So it would show, you'd still show the 6% as one line, but at the bottom you'd show the two separate ones. So that's something that, Wayne?
More work.
Thank you, Director Monteith. No, I also was looking at the regional district of Thompson-Nicola, and they actually have a really nice visual representation on their page for the public to look to see what the tax is. So I'm going to work on that. I won't be in effect for this budget, but I'm hoping to have it in for next budget to
But
be more.
For this, we can do.
Yes, for the Apex one, I can do that for you, but to get the visual representation like TNRD, it's going to take more than March, so it'll be next. Hopefully, the next budget process will have something for the public to visually see, which will help.
Okay, follow up. Director Monteith?
Thank you, through the chair. I think Area I is unique because it's got lots of satellite communities, and Twin Lakes knows that they're not in any fire service, so they know that they can take that out of their budget right away. They can figure that out. Other areas as well can figure that out, but Apex and Caledon both being the two larger tax with the fire departments, and they both having significant projects going on. I think that it's important. Thank you.
Okay. Did I see a tentative hand here, Director McCordoff, and then over here?
Thank you. When we're looking at the requisition summary, it's quite obvious that Osoyoos has the largest percentage increase. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is the Sun Bowl Arena, and there are several different things there that are going to be included in that. One of them is that the Sun Bowl Arena is 50 years old and it needs a new roof. We've also decided in Osoyoos that it's important to put money aside for building funds, so reserves, so that we have some money available when we need it, because we have a ton of old buildings. And one of the things that we've had to deal with is asbestos removal from several of our buildings, which we are doing. So 10.6686% is a pretty high percentage to be looking at. And I'm just wondering if the CAO has anything else to add to that. Thank you.
CAO.
So that budget for the Sun Bowl is one of the many budgets that you as a board don't really have any control of. The budget is submitted to us. The Sun Bowl is contracted out. We contracted out to them. Biggest single increase, Director, you are correct, is actually transfers to reserves. And that's taken into account the future capital upgrades and requirements. So one of the first things that I saw is I saw the material increase, and I picked up the phone and I talked to the Osoyoos CFO, and he explained the reason. And the rest of the operational costs are within line of the past with a small increase. But if you go to that specific line item and budget, you will see a material increase. It actually contravenes your revenue policy, because if it's a material increase in transfers to reserves, you do need to authorize it specifically. It's not just automatic, because that affects the taxpayer. But in this case, it's a different government that's requesting the money, and we're not doing our due diligence if we don't increase the reserves. And that's why it's not just affecting Osoyoos, it's also affecting Area A, because Area A pays a portion of that fee. And one of the things that I have to say, commend to Area A, is Area A has actually been contributing in the past gas tax money to fund some of those costs, so that it helps reduce the taxes. And Osoyoos automatically gets the break because it all only comes out of Area A gas tax.
Director Federico?
Thank you, through the chair. If we have changes that we'd like to make, do we bring them forward now, or do we have a meeting with Wayne to bring forward to second reading? So I have a couple minor ones, but making notes, I have a couple of bigger ones that I kind of need to chat with some staff about.
Okay, CAO?
So changes can be made right up until the last day it's adopted. It shouldn't be made at this table right now, but if you email or have a meeting with Wayne, it will come back as a request to the board for the change.
Okay. Director Conants?
First of all, I want to say thanks for all the hard work you guys are doing on this. It's obviously very, very complicated. So, but I just have to say that, well, through the chair, that when we started out this project, I know that you were hoping to get everybody's requisition down to 4%, 5, thank you. And so Penticton's at 8.5%. And if I'm reading it correct, right? 8.04%, we'll say, or 8.5, it looks like. Except then looking at non-market growth, but basically it is at 8.5%. So and we don't have a bowl like, an arena in that way through the RDOS and so I know we've got some new hires. Tell me what Penticton can do to make sure this is below 5% next year. It's just, where is this, would you say this is mostly coming from?
Either the CAO or Wayne, one.
So you do have to include the non-market growth, so it's 7.53. A lot of the driving force for increases, because Penticton is the biggest contributor, 40.2, I believe 40.3%. Any increases in regional trails, for instance, that's what you're asking for, the driving force. I think we did a very good job this year in allocating. The services are now I'd say 99% are paying their own way now. The subsidies are no longer there. And this is the first full year that I was able to change it so that each department is now no longer being subsidized. There was some subsidized in the past, and mostly recreation, I'll tell you right now. So that has gone. But as far as what the driving force is, the regional trails, regional parks, that would be the driving force for the increases.
Okay, follow up. Go ahead.
Okay, so through the chair, in our next budget, we can look at, as we go through, not approving so much regional trails and so many in those particular things, because I think that 7.53% is probably a pretty high increase also. So next year we'll have to look at that as we go line by line and not approve maybe those items.
CAO?
So also one of the driving forces is the tunnel. So that tunnel it was capital funded by donations 100%. But anytime we accept a donation, there's a consequence. And that consequence is the operational costs. So because of that operational costs, you each one are paying a percentage. And again, Penticton's the highest contributor. So that one of the things that we didn't do right with the tunnel is it should have gone to the board at the time that the offer was made to donate the tunnel. Is it a great thing? Yes, it's awesome. But you should have been told of what the consequences are. And going forward, now that I'm here, that's the rules. If there's a small donation for a bench or a tree, etc., you don't need to see those. But when there's a donation that affects the future of your operating costs, there's a huge operating cost of that. Everything from wages to supplies. And there's a donation that's coming through right now that's not even coming through us that will affect the 2026 budget, which you're going to be aware of. And you have to make a hard choice. Do you accept a donation? You're also accepting the operational cost. And in this case here, you weren't given the choice to say yes or no for the tunnel. So you automatically inherited the operational. And that's one of the key drivers for your increase.
Okay, Director Holmes.
I think, the reason it looks like the municipalities are paying so much more is really, it comes down to that we don't use as many services as the electoral areas. And it just so happens that this year, three of the services that municipalities do use have had large increases in regional trails, regional transit, and emergency planning. And so I think it kind of skews it a little bit for the municipalities, but it just so happens that this year that, three of the things that we do participate in have had big increases. The one that always bothers me and it always goes up every year, and it's always a big chunk is, and it's the hardest I have to explain to the public is the ever increasing change for general government. And that's the hardest to explain. People ask, well, what is general government? He says, well, it's this building and stuff like that, right? So I don't know. If there's anything we could try and get under control in the years moving forward, I would say it's that one.
Okay. Any other discussion? Director Gettins?
Thanks to the chair. I echo that too of Director Holmes, and also just really defining for the public the difference between lower electoral area administration and the planning as well. I just think there are such large numbers, and it is really difficult to explain it and taking a look through that. And maybe we need to take some time a little bit earlier next year to review that a bit further.
Okay. Director Wiebe?
Thank you, through the chair. I think one of the things, we just had an additional, I think it was in Appendix D, for wages. I've said this before, but it bears repeating. Some of us will remember when the whole fire department concept was sold to communities because it protected the buildings. And now, most of the time, that's the smallest amount of what they actually do. So our taxpayers are funding for a bunch of stuff we never really agreed to cover a scope of services that really should be provincial. And especially in our community, being a small community, we feel the pinch of $10,000 is something that I'm going to have to explain to the residents, right? I mean, there isn't much wiggle room. And while some of these numbers may not look like much in a big scope of millions of dollars for our residents, every $10,000 is a 1% increase. So ours, I mean, we fought pretty hard to keep ours low, and I thank the CAO for that. But even trying to trim, the fat as much as we can, we still ended up at, 6.3%, which historically from the RDOS asks is significantly lower than we have been looking at in the past, and I appreciate that. But I still have a difficulty with the model that's being used for, we'll call it fire protection, but there's a lot more. Our number one call now is medical first response. And quite frankly, I think that's out of the scope of something that a local taxpayer should be paying for. I see the need for it, but there's an ambulance service that is specifically designed to provide that service. I would suggest that they are underfunded, and right. And so to some extent, we're passing this off to the local, and it keeps coming in line items. The increases keep coming. I don't think I want to follow the model of, sending a letter or not collecting monies on behalf of the province or doing those things, but it's just something that, and I'm not sure what the fix is, other than I just wanted to express the frustration that some of these things I think are provincial responsibility, and the municipalities and local areas keep having to pay that bill.
Okay, I'm going to go to Director Roberts next.
Thank you to the chair. And that's exactly the reason why we've taken to Siliga and to UBCM constantly saying about how we look at small communities, rural and remote, dealing with fire departments and brigades where it's pre-hospital care support. Again, when I end up as a paramedic rushing to a community or a person that's 20 minutes at code 3 distance, it's nice when even one or two volunteers or people are there providing information to expedite the speed of dealing with the patients. But again, it's as Director Wiebe was stating, it's difficult on our small communities to be able to maintain that kind of level of service. And it is and has been an offloading, not a downloading, but an offloading in regards to the lack of support and responsibility the province had previously in regards to supporting pre-hospital care. And that also ties into the things that were brought forward by Director Knodel in regards to ICBC and dealing with motor vehicle accidents, where the majority in our rural areas are not people that live in our communities, but people passing through, but we bear the price. So I think this is something that collectively we need to continue to march forward, and with whether or not it's with pitchforks and torches, but keep on banging on the door at the province in regards to their responsibilities. Thank you.
Okay. Not seeing any further discussion on the presentation. I'm thinking we need a motion for the budget itself. You're moving it, Director Gilbert, and seconded by Director Bush. Any discussion? No hands? All happy for now? And we would just add, as far as the presentations that are going to be potentially going out to communities, Wayne, do we need to get in touch with you if we think we need one in our area, or how is that looking?
There's
Just
going to be a
clarify.
presentation right now by Eric, I believe.
Okay. Just shortly after this?
Right now for that specific
Okay,
question.
so
yeah.
before I even call a question on the budget, maybe we should have that presentation, or should we do it after, CAO? After, okay. Question, Director Monteith?
Thank you. Through the chair, when does the regional district anticipate getting its actuals from last year completed? Because I feel like that's part of the process of what I'm looking for, to see where my budgets ended last year, to see what I want to do this year for some of them. And I'm kind of feeling like the timing is.
It's a lag every year, but I'll go to CFO. Go ahead.
So our audit begins in March-ish, middle of March. As we get closer to the end of January, we close out 2024 because we're still getting invoices in, and we even get them after that. So we do our best, we push the vendors, we try to get as much in as we can, as quick as we can, but really you're not going to see final numbers until closer to March.
Okay, follow up, and then over to Director Taylor.
Thank you. Are we able to get our current reserve balances and gas tax balances? Because I think that I want to look at some of that for my budgets.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If that could be sent out to directors, that would be great. Director Taylor.
Yeah, following along with comment about actuals, I'm not talking about an audited year end. I'm just talking about in-house numbers. We do all our input with staff based on last year's budget and this year's budget. And we're not even on, maybe everyone else is, and I'm just 2 years behind everybody, but I haven't never seen actual for, 2024 in order that I see, okay, this is what I budgeted. That was my actual, 11 months out of 12. And here's my next year's budget. It just seems like I'm basing everything off of budgeted information. I have no idea how accurate that last year's budget was.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem when we get our actuals as late as we do. It's hard to compare that during the budget process. It's maybe something we should get a look at after the fact even, but.
Can I just ask a show of hands? I mean, what other electoral area directors have seen actuals for year to date?
A few. Okay. If you ask, sometimes you get them. But it might be something that we should all get. But CFO?
So in the past, and it's been a couple of years, I believe, but we used to bring forward variance reports quarterly. We can absolutely start that back again. And so that we can show you, where we are, at least on a quarterly basis, and can highlight any services that are on the offside, or if things are all looking well, we can certainly inform the board.
Okay, I'll go to CAO as well.
Also, the board has received reports if of the 162 services we have, if it's over budget by more than $5,000, you get a report that says it's over budget and why and how it's going to be funded. It doesn't mean that it's going to be a deficit overall, because we would just draw from reserves, but you will be told if we have to draw from reserves to offset the deficit. So and as far as the audited accounts, that's the official numbers, the audited. However, what we've done in finance in the past is we do a worst case scenario. We go through every one of the accounts and assume it's going to be the worst case. And then by looking at the worst case, we can identify surpluses. and then we come back to you before third reading to say, okay, you now have a surplus that you can have wiggle room. And that's something that the three of us do so that we are looking at it with a very conservative eye.
Generally, right now, though, those surpluses would go into reserves, and then you have the ability to potentially draw from reserves.
Correct. And in the past, those surpluses were used to reduce taxes.
Yeah.
That's no longer the case.
Okay. Director Monteith?
Thank you. The CAO just pretty much summed up what I was going to suggest.
Okay. Any other discussion on this? We'll go to Wayne.
I just also want to point out that the managers that do the numbers for the workshop budget work really hard at looking at the prior years, the actuals, where we're at, and they project where we need to be for the next following years. So they do look at those numbers themselves when they're putting it forward to the board. So I just want to remind that they do some of that work for you.
Okay. Not seeing any other hands. Call the question on this. This is corporate vote, obviously. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item up, or we're going to have a presentation, is that correct? On the communications plan for this budget? I'll go to the CAO for a quick intro.
Thank you. So we do have a communications plan that Eric will be presenting, and it's not going to be just black and white. There may be some changes where you do have the right to have your own specific one presentation. So I'll just pass that on to Eric. Go ahead.
Okay, Eric, go ahead.
To the chair. I've got Kim Kirkham with me, and I'll introduce what she's up to in just a moment. She's doing some work with the RDOS on a number of projects, but we'll just wait for the slideshow to jump in here. Basically, what we're doing with public engagement in the budget, which, as you know, starts right now, right after first reading, is looking at what we've done in past years, what has worked, what hasn't worked. And basically what ends up happening is it's just a series of one-off meetings and presentations at various locations. And what we're proposing this year in working with finance is based on those experiences, is we're recommending a series of roadshow events, so 4 of them, in some key locations, central locations, and obviously that ends up being municipalities, but it is, we're trying to find locations and venues that won't cost a lot of money. So for example, in Penticton, we'd use the RDOS facility, we'd use the boardroom and the lobby. We did send out some information about it, and the idea is to have an in-person opportunity to do a budget presentation, but also have a lot more information available. So for example, Wayne, being the deputy CFO, would be the featured entertainment, we'll call it, a featured presentation, doing a presentation on the budget for those areas involved, not the municipalities, because of course municipalities get their own budget presentations. So we may be doubling up and having 2 or 3 areas. We haven't exactly looked at how that might look, but what we've really tried to focus on is when you're talking about a budget to the public, they have some very specific concerns, but a lot of the concerns that have come up here are really what we want to highlight. What are the changes? What are the costs? Why are we charging what we're charging? So to have Wayne do those presentations, but also prior to the presentation, have it like a trade show event, basically. So you could walk in there and you could find out about the CART program, which lots of people have questions about. Also, what would happen is they'd be able to, during the presentation, if they're asking why specific costs are what they are, Wayne might not have that information. We're hoping that the manager from that department would be able to weigh in on that. So basically, that's what we're looking at. We've asked Kim to help be our logistics person to actually organize it, because that's what we don't have the resources to do. To organize these events would basically be, in theory, here's what I'll break it down. I'll go off my script for a moment. The idea is 4 roadshow events plus the virtual event that we have, which has never been really that well attended virtually or in person. So that event is basically anybody can log in and participate and watch from anywhere. But the 4 roadshow events would basically be a way to give people more information, answer a lot of the other questions. It gets us out in the communities more, which is, I think, really important. And then, of course, there are the odd electoral areas that really specifically want their own presentation. And I'm going to use Apex as an example. I know that traditionally there's been a really good turnout at Apex. Probably 30 people or more have shown up. So if Director Monteith, for example, is looking for a presentation at Apex, we would still have to involve Kim to help organize that event. And so that's additional hours and cost to do that. And it also means we have to look at what's Wayne's availability as well. Part of what we're trying to do here is look at the staff commitment to doing these things. Exempt staff only would be involved in these roadshows that I talked about. So it's not going to be an additional cost. They would basically, Protective Services, for example, has jumped on board to be able to go to these events and talk about Voyant Alert and to talk about Fire Smart, those kinds of things. So it's a chance to get out early and get ahead of it, but also provide really good information about the budget. And communication plan, it's called a full court press, I guess, in sports. Information release, posters, regular reminders, Voyant Alert. We really want to work more with community champions, and a lot of times board directors are those community champions to make sure people know about meetings. And then we look at a small advertising budget as well. When we do our virtual meeting, where anybody can tune in on YouTube or through WebEx, that one we would connect with an online news provider to also have that made available virtually. And I'm going to end with this slide here. So when we have an event, basically we have the subject matter expert. So whether it's a water system update or any other project that we're needing to go out and present to the public, we have the subject matter experts who are in charge of making sure that that event happens, that the information is available. But the logistics of organizing it is really a separate entity, and making sure that we have correct and timely information available and that we're doing engagement the way it should be done. That requires logistics, and that's where a person like Kim is going to be coming in to basically provide that service, administration and planning. And then communications and engagement, we're really providing the strategic guidance and support. So just in closing, I think you've all seen the document that was sent out by Wayne. It outlines what the plan is, and with that, I will stop talking.
Okay. Any questions or Director Conans?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure I understood what you said through the chair. Are you saying that you're not going to go to Penticton and present as typical? And I guess my reaction to that is that, you know, we're paying a substantial amount of this budget, and I don't see how walking across the street would cost more money. So why can't we, and by the way, also on top of that, I think it's actually a good way for Penticton, if, you know, presenting at a council meeting is a good way for the RDOS to explain to Penticton residents what RDOS even is and what they're paying into. And so I just don't understand how it costs more money to walk across the street to give a presentation.
Clarify that.
To the chair, the municipal presentations will still take place. They've already been scheduled. So you will have Wayne and likely the CAO at your council meetings presenting to council and therefore your public. It's the electoral area meetings. What we were having happen was there were 10 sometimes different meetings, different locations. Not a lot of people showed up. I went to a meeting once in Tulameen where 2 people showed up, and they were not there to talk about the budget. They were there they wanted detailed information about emergency programs and access routes and things like that. So we thought, why don't we condense it and provide as much information as possible in 4 events plus the virtual, so that's a total of 5. And then, as I said, I know there will be one-off communities that really want their own presentation. What we have to do is work with Wayne to make sure he's available to do that, preferably not on a Sunday. We've had some feedback on Sundays not being a great day for some people who would like to attend church services and those types of things. And then, of course, making sure that Kim, and she has made herself available to help do the logistics, because there is quite a bit involved in organizing any one of these meetings to make sure it happens properly.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. Director Holmes.
Yeah, we find, in Summerland, we find the same thing with our budget open house. It doesn't really stir up a whole lot of interest. You call it the budget open house. So you try to change it to make it about, you know, what it is, the services that the budget is paying for. And so I think if you promote it like that, it's a road show where you can talk about curbside pickup or regional trails or whatever, you get a lot more traction than just saying, it come out and hear about the budget, which kind of turns everybody off. But I was just wondering what the timeframe is for all that, and when's the intention for the second reading to come? Is it all have to be done by before it comes back to the board, or and then what's the time scale for that? CAO?
So it doesn't always have to be done at first reading. We try to get in as much as we can, but in some municipalities, I had one last year that was done the day before third and adoption for a municipality, not because we couldn't make it, but we have to work around the municipalities. The electoral areas, it's easier to work around.
So it was just a scheduling issue.
Yes.
Okay, Director Taylor and then Monteith. And, whoops, as well, Director Bloomfield. Go ahead first with Director Bloomfield. I skipped him completely and had him first.
Okay, I got my eye on you. Thank you through the chair. I would just like to say that the open houses that we have in Penticton for the public are extremely well attended, and it's because we focus on city services as much as we focus on the budget and the cost of providing those services. So I think if there was a different direction, a different focus on the public open houses, and then you might have a better success rate. And it may even be possible, I'm not sure, we'd have to check with the city, but whether you want to sort of piggyback on our city open houses with presentations on regional district services to talk about those services whereby people are paying for those services through the contributions from the city to the regional district. So just a thought, and maybe there's some cooperation that can be done there.
Okay, keep it in mind. Director Taylor.
Yeah, I think we're challenged by the differences between municipalities and electoral areas. I mean, you get 300 to a budget meeting. Well, I mean, if I got 30 to a budget meeting, I'd be happy too. And I think we had 25 last year. So that was a budget meeting. Can I clarify, where are the 4 locations?
Proposed locations would be, one would be Princeton. I don't have the list in front of me. Actually, I should have it with me. I'm sorry about that. But one, certainly Penticton. And then we were thinking Oliver, and I believe the other one was Karamias. So what we're trying to do is basically pick locations where people would generally travel to anyway, and where we have facilities available to accommodate enough people. And just quickly, if I can, through the chair, to go back to Mayor Bloomfield, we are meeting with your communications people on Friday, tomorrow. And I'll bring that up. I think the idea of attending a Penticton event where you're talking about services and having almost like a booth or some sort of area where people can ask about the RDOS services, and even for your staff to then direct people to the RDOS area, because some of the services we provide are specific, managed by the RDOS. I think that would be really helpful. And it shows good one region working together collaboration.
Okay. Is there a follow-up? You're okay. Director Monteith and then Gettins.
Thank you, through the chair. So how do I get my communities on a list? Because I know Apex would like one and Caledon. So yeah, how do we get that going? Nope.
It's a conversation, I think, with Wayne. We just get that conversation started. We'll start an email chain, and because a lot of it is going to be Wayne's availability as far as doing those presentations and where he can go. Apex usually is likely going to be an overnight trip, I think, depending on the weather and on the time of day, that kind of thing. But let's just start the conversation with Wayne.
Okay. You're okay.
I just want to follow up that Apex already has an event in plan. So I'm already, so if we can team into that, that's where we will be successful.
Yeah. Okay. Director Gettens.
Thanks to the chair. I think this is an interesting idea to do a road show and talk about things like regional trails and fire and response, and that I quite like that. For Area F, we tend to have a budget meeting every couple of years, and then I try and rotate it up by Summerland and the one having at the schools there in West Bench. So I probably wouldn't need one in Area F this year. I think that things are going okay. I'll find out soon enough, I'm sure, if there's a lot of questions. I'm wondering if maybe with the road show, and it is, so you're right, the towns that you mentioned, Penticton, Cairns, and Princeton, Oliver, I'm wondering if it's just maybe some of the naming, like if the Penticton workshop could be focused on E, D, I, and F, and then maybe them, just so those areas know which one to go to. I think that'd be helpful. We did an event in Penticton, and we had a lot of people from Naramata and Greater West Bench come, and it was quite successful, I thought, and it was nice to hear from other perspectives from different areas and stuff. So I think it's good to give this a try, but I do also support any area that wants one in their own areas for sure. I know like there's some of that's quite important, but I think it's good to give it a try and see if it works.
Okay. Not seeing any other hands. Thank you. Want some
I'm just going to
closing
close
remark?
with, it's really about customer service. That's what we're trying to do, is get out into communities more, which we don't do as much as we would like to, and that was part of our goal for 2025. And providing as much information at those meetings as possible, rather than have a budget meeting where there's questions specific to staff that maybe staff aren't available to answer. And also, I just wanted to mention, many of you may be following what's going on in Los Angeles right now with the wildfires down there. There are lessons to be learned for this part of the world with strong winds and dry conditions. And I've been watching it really closely on the communication angle, but also on the conditions. And I think when we have meetings in January, February, to talk about getting your property ready for wildfire season, for flooding, those types of things, this presents a really good opportunity to send that message to people. It's top of mind for a lot of people. They know that it can happen here. And if we're able to be in communities, getting people to sign up for Voyant Alert and helping them understand how it works and why we use it, those types of things, I think we can set ourselves up for success going through the year.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you very much, both of you, for the presentation. Moving on to legislative services, freedom of information applications. I'll go to the CAO. I think he'll probably turn it over to Ms. Mulden, but go ahead.
I will. To provide the board, the purpose of this is to provide the board of directors a summary of requests received in 2024 for access to records under the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, and I will forward this to the deputy CAO.
Ms. Mulden.
Thanks very much. So this is our annual report on FOI. We have a rather robust privacy management program, and one of the goals is to be as proactive as possible with respect to releasing information to the public. So every time we get a request for access to records or a freedom of information request, we look at that and say, could we have done that our own self prior? Sometimes we could. I think over the years, we've really focused on getting information out proactively so that we can head these off. And so our numbers go up and down each year. There's not a specific sort of rhythm with that. I would say this year, we had 30 requests this year, which in some years we have 18, 15. This was a hard year. We had a lot of them. We had primarily related to bylaw building and planning, which is always the case. And most of that information simply can't just be handed over and released. Staff in those departments are well trained in knowing what information they can and cannot provide just on a regular basis. So when we have these kinds of numbers, we know that there's a lot more demand from the public for access to information. They're paying attention to things, and we're under scrutiny, which is fine. That's what a local government should be. So we've summarized here. Jillian does the majority of the work with getting it in and getting the application in and acknowledging it. And there are rigid timeframes on this, which is really challenging. 30 working days comes very quickly, especially when you have significant requests. We've had approximately 4,000 pages of records released in 2024. That's a lot of scanning and checking and redacting and double checking again. So here's our list here basically of the ones that we received this year. And if there are any questions on this, we're both here to answer it.
Okay, start with Director Monteith and then over to Director Holmes.
Thank you. Through the chair, could you explain the UBCM briefing note request?
Somebody put in a request to look at our UBCM briefing notes, to release that. All of them.
There's no real reason to keep them private.
Not
is
at
there?
all. We're proud of them, actually. And I would say the applicant came back with really positive feedback on the work that we'd done to prepare for UBCM. So it was a great thing. And that actually, that is not specifically an FOI request. That is routinely releasable information. So this came immediately following UBCM. But yeah, it was a good thing.
Okay, interesting. Makes you wonder sometimes who and why these releases go. But Director Holmes.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so those 30 requests, were those from 30 individuals, or were there any multiple requests from the same person or persons?
They appear to all be individual based on the names.
Okay. Director Bloomfield.
How many, or what percentage of an FTE was spent on FOIs?
This was a significant hit for us in the the third and fourth quarters of the year. For some reason, we get more inquiries in the latter half of the year. I would say probably, it was almost a half a FTE, if not more, just going through all the records.
So no cost recovery to speak of on those things.
There is some, but not a
Not
lot.
by any means full cost recovery. Okay, Director Bush.
Yeah, so Director Roberts and I were at the annual general meeting of the Trail Society, and they brought up they wanted to do an FOI on the acquisition for the trail between Costin and Caramias through that ranch. Did you get that request yet? So it would have been just before Christmas.
I don't believe so.
Yeah, probably not. So that'd be another one coming.
Yay.
Yay. Something to celebrate, eh? Oh, lovely. Any other questions on this? There's no required motion. It's just for information. So moving on to the next item, F2, Vintage Views and Lakeshore Waterworks Service Establishment Bylaws, CAO.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to ensure the requisition limit in the service establishment bylaw for Vintage Views and Lakeshore Waterworks Utility accurately reflect the debt servicing and operational costs for providing each service. And the administrative recommendation is that third reading of Vintage Views Wastewater System Services Establishment Bylaw 3068/2024 be rescinded and the bylaw reread the third time as amended, and that third reading for Lakeshore Waterworks System Service Establishment Bylaw 3071/2024 be rescinded and the bylaw be reread a third time as amended. Staff's here to answer questions.
I'll go to Director Taylor. Direction on this?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Moved. Is there a seconder for it? Thank you. It's on the floor. Any discussion? Not seeing any hands on this one. This is a corporate vote. I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. No items out of the consent. I'll go to the CAO reports and over to the CAO.
Just one, pleased to announce that next Thursday will be the first Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen Fire Chiefs meeting, where it will be held in here or it will be with teams, because some of the fire departments are quite a ways away, Tunameen, Anacus Mountain, etc. And every second month, it will be all the fire departments will be asked, not just the regional district ones, but the municipal and all the smaller ones that have nothing, that aren't directly related to the regional district.
Okay. We've got SOGA resolutions and meetings on here. Is that for you, Ms. Mullen?
Sorry, I slipped that on there and forgot to tell the CAO.
Ah, okay.
It
Go
is
ahead.
just basically your bi-monthly reminder that SOGA is coming very soon, and we would like to start preparing the materials that we need and getting any resolutions in as soon as possible so that they have the sufficient time they need to process it. So just a reminder again, we did send out all the requests from last year recently. If anybody has any questions, please contact me. And if you have any resolutions or thoughts on it, please bring them forward and we'll bring them to the next meeting. But we will be running out of time. I believe the first meeting in February is our last opportunity to get things through the board.
Okay. If we have potential resolutions, then should we forward them to you and then they come back to the board for discussion and stuff? Okay, just so everybody's aware, any thoughts on that or suggestions, definitely get it into Ms. Molden. Go ahead, Director Roberts.
Thanks to the chair. So as we've had other resolutions move forward to SILGA and that move to UBCM, if there's been no response on those from the province, does it kind of go back into the queue or should it be formally presented again?
I'll go to Director Coyne. He's got some thoughts there on it since he's on UBCM.
They're always in the queue. There's 176 or something from last year that go to the province this year, and the province has them. It's always something that UBCM staff's working on, but it's pretty hard when there's hundreds upon hundreds of resolutions every year, and you get 1 week where we get 3 days, I think, to make our case to the province to try to action those 100+ resolutions every year. So it's and then if you look at the history of it, and if you do put a resolution into SILGA, you'll see there's a recommendation from UBCM usually, and they'll give the background how many times it's been presented. At UBCM, the same thing with the resolutions. It'll say in the resolutions package how many times that same or a very similar resolution has gone forward. So it's always in the works. It's just you got this window this big, and it's got to get it on the priority list of the province, and that's the hard part.
By all means, follow up.
So we shouldn't just try to duplicate it again. It's in there. I can look it up and then say, okay, I won't add it to my list.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we've been talking about how we can make resolutions more efficient and effective at UBCM, because we're the only province that still does resolutions the way that we do it. And what we're finding is we just get repeat after repeat after repeat of the same resolution, and we're not getting, we're not really getting anywhere. So we've been talking real high level, like, what do we do? Do we have all the resolutions go through the regional districts for the municipalities, and then from there to the local government association, so that has, the backup to be able to move forward, and we can weed out some of those repeat resolutions, because some municipalities just go straight through, right? They don't get the resolution that they want, or they don't get the support that they want from the regional district, so they go around the regional district. They don't get the support from SILGA or other local government associations, and they send it straight through as well. We want to be able to create the strongest resolutions we can, and that should go for everybody. The strongest resolutions and the strongest argument to try to persuade the province to act on it, right?
It's an ongoing challenge. Director Conans.
I have a question for Director Coyne through the chair. So, going through the UBCM the last couple of years, I've noticed that actually it's almost better if we put forward a resolution that has no comment or no resolution from the UBCM board, and so that it's actually presented instead of in a group, it's actually presented separately. And can you talk about that?
I don't really know about all that because I'm not on that committee, so I don't understand how they pick and choose where the resolutions go. But there's a whole committee for resolutions, and they are the ones that figure all that stuff out. I think like the biggest thing is try to create something that is new and something that is really makes a point, right? Because the province, they hear it over and over and over and over again, and it almost becomes noise, right? Like, and it's not always the squeaky wheel is going to get the grease on this one. It's like, yeah, we hear you. You're just bugging us now, right?
Follow up, go ahead.
Just to follow up, we could talk a long time about this, but I was thinking that through the chair that it's actually hard now to make a point, I think harder, because you can't do a regional project, or it has to be something that includes everybody in BC or somehow, like we couldn't talk necessarily in our motion, we couldn't talk about 201. We had to talk about regional roads or forestry roads, or, and so I think it's harder and harder to make a specific point. And what's your feedback on that?
Okay, well, that example specifically, we have in Silga, we have numerous examples that are exactly the same. So if, say, the city of Penticton wanted to push that resolution forward again, I would reach out to, well, first go through the regional district, look for a co-sponsor on that, say the Shuswap Regional District, who had similar issues, but theirs was around fire and using those same type of roads for fire egresses and whatnot. Get them to co-sign or come up with a better wording on the resolution, send that forward, and that shows regional approach to it. Because then when it gets approved by, so say it gets approved by, and this is something everybody should think about. When we approve something at Silga, right, all the membership says, yeah, we support this. You now have the backing to go to the province yourself and say, look, the entire southern interior approves of this same motion. We need some action on this. When it goes to UBCM, if it gets approved at UBCM, whether or not the province actions it or not, we can use that to our leverage at the local government level to then go, look, the whole province is behind us on this. We need you guys to help us with it, right? So just because it goes to the province, nothing ever happens, doesn't mean we can't use it to our advantage down the road, because we have resolution after resolution saying the same thing. The membership is upset. The municipalities and the local governments across the province are upset. Let's try to solve these problems. And if you say it like that to the province, say, let's try to solve this together, they'll cooperate with you.
So advocacy after the fact is important as well. Good point. Director Holmes?
I'm not sure if I heard this correctly from Director Coyne, but I am not so sure if I would like the idea of requiring municipalities to get approval from the regional district before submitting a resolution to SILGA. Just for an example, in Summerland, we're the only district municipality in this region, and if we have an issue that's a district municipality issue, what's the point of bringing it to this table? But there is a lot of district municipalities around the province who we connect with, and we can build that support with, So so I certainly wouldn't want to lose the ability of municipalities to bring resolutions directly to SILGA.
I think that's a later discussion. So. Yeah. Okay. Moving on here. Chair's report. There's not a whole lot for me to report on over the Christmas break. Director's motions. Quiet on that front too for a change, which is good at this stage of the game. Board members' verbal updates. Anything to report on from your communities? Again, quiet there. That brings us to the closed session. We're looking to go in camera, and that in accordance with section 91C and J of the Community Charter, the board closed the meeting to the public on the basis of labor relations or other employee relations and information that is prohibited or information that if it were presented in a document would be prohibited from disclosure under Section 21 of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. So looking to go in camera. Motion for that moved, seconded. Thank you. All in favor? Great. Any opposed? Motion carries. So I will give Adam a seconder already, but I'll just wait until I get the thumbs up. Thank you. So it's moved and second adjournment. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. I believe the next item is actually a lunch break, if I'm not mistaken. Correct. So I believe it's in the room, so you can. Session, and everybody could make their way back to their seats. We'll start here shortly. So I don't know. Thanks, Adam. Okay, guys, if we can all make our way back to our chairs, we'll get started here. We do have just the one committee meeting left to us this afternoon, Planning and Development, and I'm going to turn it over to Director Weeb to chair this one. So please go ahead.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order at 12:11. Ask for a motion to adopt the agenda. Motion and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Oh, just quick. I read in my little notes here. Do I have to ask for the opposed? If everybody puts their hand up? Okay. So was there anybody opposed to? No. So we're here today. So look at land use bylaw amendments, implementation, and I believe at this point, let's turn it over to CAO. Thank you.
So thank you. Rather than read the novel here, I'll just paraphrase here. The recommended motion is that the amendment to electoral area A, C, D, E, I, G, and E, official community plan, OCP, bylaw be prepared in order to undertake all of the requirements and recommendations in your report. And I'd like to pass this over to Mr. Garish.
I believe you have a presentation, Mr. Garish?
To the chair, yes, I do. I'll just wait for it to come up here. Excellent. Okay. So the topic before the committee today is the provincially mandated small-scale multi-unit housing implementation requirements for your zoning bylaws. And so I do have a presentation, as you can see, and I'll just start with some quick background, because I know it has been a fair few months since this issue was last before the board for its consideration. So for context, this is a provincial requirement that was introduced into the Local Government Act in 2003, and it's related to the province's push to increase residential housing development and opportunities and affordability within the province. And one of the ways that they did that was to create what they called a restricted zone, which is one in which a local government zoning bylaw only allows for a limited range of housing options, either in the form of one single family dwelling, one duplex, maybe a limit on suites or accessory dwellings. And the province set out minimum density requirements, which you can see here. And a lot of this depends on servicing and regional growth strategy boundaries, but for the electoral areas, for the most part, it's 2 dwelling units per parcel that the zoning bylaw has to allow in all residential zones. And the legislation required that the regional district have that in place by June 30th of 2024. The province also released in December of 2023 a policy manual that the Act specifies the local government must consider when it's making changes to its land use bylaws to accommodate SSMUH. And the manual includes a number of recommendations that relate to building types, density, setbacks, height, parcel coverage, and vehicle parking requirements. And all those recommended approaches are, again, to facilitate what the province is hoping to see from local governments, which is a favorable regulatory environment for new building forms in areas that have traditionally been reserved for the one single-family home per parcel or duplexes. The province gave an update in July of last year, just letting local governments know that in relation to the policy manual, and I've emphasized the important part here, that they would be looking at how local governments have implemented those recommendations into their bylaws. And so this was all put before the board, and you can see here the various stages, and this is a summary. I think your report has a much more detailed background timeline in terms of consideration and steps that were taken. But from February, when it was initiated, through to August 15th, the board was looking at SSMU implementation, but made a decision in August to rescind and abandon the bylaws at that time. More recently, as a result of that decision, the province has contacted the regional district and is looking for an update on where we're at with implementation of SSMUH. And they've also pointed out that failure to comply may result in compliance measures being initiated by the minister. So with that, I'm just going to jump over now to a very quick summary overview of the bylaws that were considered over the summer by the board. So there was basically two parts, the zoning and the OCP. I'll start with the zoning first. And again, as I indicated, this is a summary, but in order to get to that favorable regulatory environment for housing development that the province is encouraging, it was being proposed to combine 6 existing residential zones down into one, to increase the range of permitted dwelling types that are permitted in those residential zones, to create a more favorable building envelope through I don't want to say more generous, but reduced setback requirements for principal and accessory structures. Also increased building heights in the low-density residential small holdings and medium-density zones. Implementing a change that was enacted to the building code in 2019, which would be to remove floor area restrictions on secondary suites. They're currently 125 square meters in the zoning bylaw. It was proposed to remove that. Also looking at removal of a minimum building width requirement, which generally impacted the placement of mobile homes in residential zones. And then also outside of residential zones and more in the rural zones, especially above 1 hectare where the 1 hectare policy doesn't apply, to increase density by not having suites count against the accessory dwelling numbers that are allowed per parcel. And as the board may be aware, those accessory dwelling numbers are based on parcel size, and every 4 hectares gets another dwelling unit up to 4 total. So those were the zoning changes, and then to support those, there were a number of OCP changes as well, and that's to increase the permitted maximum densities allowed in the low-density residential zones to reflect that provincial direction. Also changes in medium density to reflect, obviously, changes that were being proposed to low density. We had a discussion with the board and committee about the utility of some of the existing development permit area designations. I think the most challenging one that we highlighted at that time was the multifamily DP in Area D, which had a number of the hallmarks of a challenging DP that the province had highlighted in the policy manual. There was also the protection of farming DP in Area C, which we proposed for repeal. And then again, just again, policy manual recommendations, proposed some revisions to the OK Falls Town Center and Naramata Village area DPs. Off the top of my head, I believe primarily that was in relation to landscaping requirements from professionals and possibly some other considerations as well. Now, I want to take a step back a little bit further. You can see here the date of March 2nd, 2023, but I'll actually start a little bit before that with this next slide. So, obviously at a staff level, we're aware that housing availability, housing affordability, housing options has been a concern for the board for many, many years, and that there was a previous director's motion from February 2021 that had asked staff to bring forward some options for consideration at the board on how to deal with this. And then also at that same time, or 2 months later, the housing needs assessment report had been completed and indicated that housing wasn't being provided at the current levels that were needed to anticipate or to accommodate future demand. So in relation to the 2023 strategic projects, the board had prioritized as its number one option or issue or item to be brought forward was housing options. And you can see in the other column, once some of those main priorities were dealt with, at the top of the list again was to bring forward a discussion on housing strategy. So in response to that, and I've just recycled I shouldn't say recycled, but I brought forward the slides that we presented in March of 2023 or February 2023, and I haven't changed them. So they're more of a historical document to indicate that, some of the issues that eventually ended up in the small scale multi-unit housing and the provincial policy manual had actually been considered by the board much earlier, 6 months earlier, in fact, when we had this housing options discussion with you. And so there's a lot of overlap between what the board had indicated they wanted to pursue in relation to housing options and what eventually ended up in the provincial legislation and policy manual. And I'll just go through these very quickly, and I'm not going to touch on the dot points because, of course, they are about 2 years old now, and some of them are no longer accurate or up to date. But we did have that discussion about updating the housing needs assessment. As it happens, the province then mandated that we had to update those. We discussed replacing single-family zoning in OK Falls, and then subsequently, of course, 6 months later, the province basically said in OK Falls we have to allow 3 to 4 units per parcel. We discussed with the board, and again, this was based on the 2019 building code changes, removing secondary suite floor area restrictions. As I recall, I believe there's a passing reference to that in the policy manual, so again, some duplication and overlap here. Talked about increasing the number of dwellings per parcel, especially where they're servicing. Kind of related to the earlier slide about OK Falls, but there may be some other locations, Apex, possibly benchlands in Armada where there is water and sewer. Gallagher Lake comes to mind as well. So increasing density in those locations. Increasing the floor area allowance for accessory dwellings, which I believe was proposed or included in the summer amendments that the board considered. Looking at updating the DCC charges bylaw. In early 2023, that was only in the context of potential waivers or exemptions for not-for-profit housing or affordable rental housing. Of course, as the board will recall from the discussion today, regular meeting, the province provided funding to help with SSMUH implementation. And so this DCC review, the scope of it has significantly changed since then because of the funding available to now look at all of our bylaws and bring the cost charges up to date. OBWB and the 1 hectare policy. So this is one that actually the board did implement prior to SSMUH coming down the line. So that was completed. This was also completed, so changes to the zoning bylaw to allow mobiles on a wider range of larger parcels. Multifamily development permits, so we did have that discussion with the board earlier too. And vacation rental review and regional housing strategy. So that was kind of the background context leading into SSMUH. These next few slides we presented to you in July just because it provides additional context and I think speaks more to the quote unquote favorable regulatory environment that the province is attempting to create with these mandated changes. So as you can see here, we are dealing vis-a-vis our member municipalities with a heavy load of variance permit applications at the RDOS in comparison to our population base and parcel base. So we are on the high end. And I'll qualify this by just reminding the board that these were stats that we prepared in support of delegated DVPs, and we haven't updated them. So they do go back to 2022, but I think for illustrative purposes, they give a pretty clear indication of where we're seeing those variances being generated from. And as you can see here, it's the RS zone, so that's the low density residential, so primarily residential development. Also small holding zones, ag zones, yes, it's sometimes housing, sometimes it's farm buildings, but between those 3 categories, that's 87% of the DVPs that we've been processing. I think the period we're looking at was 2013 to 2022. And then the 4 most common types of variances that we're dealing with are parcel line setbacks for principal and accessory and building height. And that's 77% of all of our DVPs. And of course, the provincial policy manual recommended changes to building height and setbacks, again, for that favorable regulatory environment. And from our perspective at a staff level, potentially that might reduce the burden of DVPs that we're processing for these properties that are seeking variances to those very same building regulations. Yeah, sorry, I just did my summary observations as I was looking at the previous slide there, so I'll skip over this. And then this is just an informal dashboard that we were kind of maintaining at a staff level, and I think I shared it previously with the board. So this is what it looked like in July of 2024, where we had completed 2 of the items that were part of that 2023 housing options discussion. Some others were commencing, others were in process, and then the housing strategy was going to be at the end, and we might have picked that up as others were completed. But with the board's decision to abandon the bylaws in August, this chart changed significantly. So half of the items came off. And when that decision was made, it did allow us to move forward and start working on other projects. So as the board is aware, we were able to bring vacation rentals forward just before the end of last year. Housing needs report is nearing completion. We're hoping to have that up for your review next month. And then again, further to discussion at regular board today, we are taking steps to realign the funding for that DCC bylaw review and hopefully get that commenced soon as well. But there were, as a result of that previous August decision, a number of items that were then stopped or ceased to be worked on. So next steps in light of the letter from the province. And again, this is a slide I think I shared with the committee in July. So at the moment, the electoral area zoning bylaws, in terms of the mandatory minimum densities that are required under the legislation, are basically about 98% compliant. So what that means is that there's two zones, which is the RS1 and the RD1, that fall into that restricted zone category under the LGA. And those two zones affect approximately 167 parcels. And those are spread across a number of different electoral areas. It's not just one. Although saying that, I think, I've got two examples here. So you can see how these affected zones relate to the OK Falls town site and then also to parts of Naramata. And I just put this up as a visual representation of what we're looking at with some of these non-compliant zones, if you want to put it that way. And then, of course, the policy manual. And I just included this slide here to reemphasize again that, we recognize that there were, yes, a lot of recommendations within the policy manual, but those tended to overlap and dovetail with some of the direction that we thought we had received from the board in relation to the housing options discussion in March of 2023. So going forward, I think we've outlined two options for consideration at the committee today. So the first one would be the status quo, and essentially that would be a continuation of the decision that was made in August to abandon the bylaws and rescind them. This would result in the electoral area land use bylaws being zoning and OCP not being amended. Certainly an option for the board, but it's not one that we would recommend at the staff level simply because it's completely contrary to the legislative requirements in the LGA. And failure to act on it might actually result in compliance measures being implemented by the province. So certainly an option, but not the one that we're recommending. And then the second option would be to initiate bylaw amendments to ensure compliance with the SSMUH requirements. It's challenging for us at a staff level because, of course, we put recommendations before you before, which we recognize were abandoned in August, but we're not quite sure where the board wants to go with it now. So I appreciate the tome that was at the front of your report with the long list of items. It's basically a regurgitation of what was in the previous amendment bylaws, and it's there for discussion purposes and is treated as a list for you to give indications to what you're prepared to support in a new amendment bylaw and what you're not. And once we have that direction from the board, if this is your preferred option, then we can draft something up, come back to committee and present it and make sure that we're on the same page as the board with the proposed amendments. And that's it for my presentation, and I'm happy to try to answer to the best of my ability any questions that directors might have.
You have a question, Director Roberts?
Thank you through the chair. And I know I've spoke on this, and I appreciate all the work and what's being done to meet the obligations from the province. My question is specific in regards to Area G, and of course I've brought up before, of course, my silent protest about having any changes to my OCP because I don't have zoning as of yet. And there are different, in moving forward, is kind of, if I'm touching the zoning, I want to kind of do those all together. Plus, most of my area is either without sewer and water or agriculture. So again, is it mandatory for an area that doesn't have zoning? And again, I'm not speaking about the three private ones, but in my OCP. Thank you.
Mr. Garish?
There's two mandatory components. I mean, there's the mandatory density requirements, and then it's mandatory that the board consider the policy manual and what's in it. So in terms of mandatory and density requirements, arguably Area G, well, Area B would be the most compliant because there are no restrictions on the number of dwelling units that can be put per parcel, right, outside of the ALR. But the ALR is the Land Commission, and they would deal with that. Area G would probably be the next most compliant, recognizing that I think 0.08% of your land base is zoned. And those zones are generally on larger parcels. I think there's the large holdings and the small holdings. And for the most part, they allow 2 dwelling units per parcel. So I don't think there's really a compliance issue in relation to Area G. However, there are things that you may wish to consider, such as the removal of the floor area restrictions on secondary suites, not having secondary suites count against accessory dwellings in those rural zones. So there are other things that you can consider. But I suspect if I was to go back and look at where those 167 parcels that are not compliant are, there's probably none in Area G. So.
Follow-up?
So to get it clear, since I'm most likely compliant and my OCP doesn't state itself zones as of yet, is this something that could just leave off until because I know I have it in strategic planning to look at rural, like a resource hazard and agricultural zoning. Would that be a better time for me to see how that fits? Thank you.
And Mr. Garish?
Well, I think the short answer for me would be no, because we did have a June 30th. Well, of course, sorry, I'm saying this in the context of the regional district, but we did have a June 30th, 2024 deadline, which we have passed and we need to address. I mean, certainly with zoning changes for Area G unrelated to small-scale multi-unit housing, yes, I mean, that could be done as part of the 2025 review of potentially bringing in. But I would just clarify that your OCP does have land use categories for low density, for agriculture, for industrial, for commercial. So all the same types of land uses that we see in the Okanagan. And there are policy statements in there. I mean, we could certainly look at them at this time or look at them later when you're doing more potential changes to your zoning bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Now, Director Taylor, I believe you had your a bit ago.
Thank you. Through the chair, can you clarify the distinction between this requirement that we implement and the extension that I believe some areas, including Okanagan Falls, have been given to, I think now 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
So can you just discuss that a little bit for me?
So when we initially drafted the amendment bylaw that was considered over the summer, I believe because we had not heard yet from the province about the extension requests, and for the board's benefit, the extension requests were put in for OK Falls, for Heritage Hills, Lakeshore Highlands area, and also for Falder. And those were primarily in relation to infrastructure concerns and the ability to accommodate the density requirements that the legislation now set out. Of course, in the interim, we've now heard back from the province, and each of those 3 areas was granted an extension for 5 years. So to the extent that they're not compliant with SSMUH at this time, that's fine. But when the infrastructure is upgraded, the regional district is then required to change the zoning to make sure that it is compliant. So we do have an extension for 3 areas. And again, I'll just cover this off now too. There is the 4th consideration, which was the West Bench, but we were going to put in an exemption request to the province for that in relation to the geotechnical hazards. But we haven't done that yet because we haven't been able to tell the province that we're SSMUH compliant.
Yeah, go ahead, follow up.
So as a regional district and as an area, we still have to make these changes, but we don't have to actually allow higher densities, et cetera, for the 5 years for those particular areas.
Yeah, so the original zoning bylaw would have proposed 3 to 4 units per parcel for OK Falls, but now that we're aware that we have the extension, we wouldn't be putting that zoning in place until after the infrastructure has been upgraded to accommodate it, and we have that 5-year period in which to accomplish that.
I have Director Fedrigo and then Director Geddes.
Thank you to the chair. not so much questions, but two things that I'd like. I think a workshop needs to be done on this for the few of us that I need more information, I need more time, I need more processing of a lot of this. Because my understanding is like our bare minimum is just to have our secondary suites, which we have. And there's a lot of the other suggestions on here, like I'm not quite ready to make a decision or put forward information on removing setbacks. So with that too, I'd also like to have a bit of that conversation with our APCs. We have a meeting on Monday, so that can be done before the next meeting. Just to get their thoughts on some of the things that in here are not mandatory, but are suggestions from staff, just to see what their thoughts are on that impact from the community. For me, I'd also, like, we're still working on the RGS and what does that look like in terms of growth within the region and how do some of this additional suggestions than the compliance with the province impact now where we're going with growth and density. And then also some of the results from the housing needs assessment as well, I think will help indicate where and how some of that additional density might be going. So for me, I'd like to see a workshop again for those of us who'd like to participate and just go out to the APC and a bit more information.
And Director Gibbs.
Thanks to the chair. Can I just one of your slides, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly through the chair. Is it just RS1 and RD1 are the two zones that are not compliant as it is right now? Yes. And then if can I just follow up with that? And that's about 160 parcels. So does it make sense from a staff perspective to make the mandatory minimum changes to those two zones, like put those two zones only into one zone, make the minimum requirements so that we meet the provincial requirements that we have to meet? And then with some of them where the complexity is coming from, because we're waiting on other studies like the housing assessment, that can be done later, but we can meet that provincial guideline just by making the minimal changes to those two zones, the RS1 and the RD1. Is that an approach that's feasible?
Mr. Garish?
Short answer would be yes. Yeah.
Just because my area is not super involved in this, I'm just wondering if there are other areas that have some of those 160 parcels. Does that sound reasonable so we can meet the provincial requirements minimally and then move forward on some of the other changes that we've kind of got in the process going? That's not area F, just an idea.
I'm not seeing any other hands. It's Director Chahal, right?
Yeah. Chris, the SSMUH legislation, didn't it only affect municipalities with 5,000 or greater residents?
No, sir. Mr. Garish.
Sure. So the way it was structured is that across the board, it's a minimum of 2 dwellings per parcel. It should be allowed by your zoning bylaw. But in certain circumstances, that goes up to 3 or 4 dwelling units per parcel. And considerations include parcel size. So if it's less than 280 square meters, it's 3 units. If it's above that, it's 4 units. But that again is subject to the area being serviced by local government, water and sewer, and also being within the boundaries of a growth area under an RGS. And if all those criteria don't apply, then you don't have to do the 3 to 4 per unit per parcel. It's just the 2. Yeah.
Is there any follow-up, Director Chahal, or you're comfortable with that?
Good.
Thank you. Director Gilbert.
Yeah, thank you to the chair. So I guess just, hearing what's going around in this recommendation that's in front of us right now, what points need to be passed right now for us to be compliant with the province?
Mr. Garish?
So, I mean, speaking only to the minimum density requirements, we have the 2 zones that are restricted, so they don't meet the legislative requirements, and that would be the RS1 and RD1. So we'd have to make amendments to those zones to bring them into compliance, and I think that's it. And so I'm just trying to recall all the dot points. I mean, building height setbacks, floor area for suites, I mean, all that's not directly tied to density. That's all from the policy manual. You have to consider the policy manual. Arguably, you've considered it, chosen not to act on any of the recommendations within it if you just go with the density.
Follow?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you through the chair. So what I'm hearing here, just to be clear, so there's the official community plan, that seems to be all the points, but then if the bylaw amendment, which is just the first point, which is combine the current RS1, 2, 3, 4, RD1, RD2 zones into one low RS1, that would, if we did all the OCP in that first point, we would be compliant with the province's mandate. And then the ones that are behind it with the setbacks, floor density and building requirements, those are coming to us because we have a policy in regards to that the board has passed previously.
There was previous, sorry, through the chair, there was previous discussion with the board about a number of items that were then basically duplicated in the provincial direction. And so all of that was wrapped up into one, and that was the amendment bylaw that was considered by the board and then eventually abandoned in August. But as part of that, we failed to achieve compliance with SSMUH, which is why the province is now asking us where we're at. And so we need direction on how we're going to proceed forward. My only concern with proceeding on the basis of simply consolidating the existing residential zones is you'd be tasking us with trying to combine 6 zones. And if we're not talking about setbacks, we're not talking about parcel height, it's going to be a challenge for us to do that because each of those zones is going to have different setbacks and different parcel heights. And if we can't touch those, then we can't combine them together. So it might have to look different. It might just be that we have to make changes to the RS1 and the RD1 to ensure compliance with the province, and everything else just gets left.
Thank you. I had Chair Pendergraft.
Thank you. Through the chair, I think that's the route we probably need to go at this time, is just change those 2 zones, tweak that. Not to say that the other suggestions aren't important and can't be dealt with, but I think we need some time to work through that and how it's going to affect each area. And my suggestion would be similar to Director Federico's. Those should probably be done on a workshop basis so that we can, it's not going to be the same in each region or area. That's, I think, where the struggle is. When it's all here and it's take it all at once, we're not quite there. So get what minimum needs to be done. Then we can write the letter to the province and we can work through the rest in the future.
Mr. Garish?
Sure, that's completely doable at a staff level. I mean, the only comment I would make to the board is that, of course, we're in the middle of strategic planning at the moment. And with the decision that was made in August, everything that was then dropped at that point is no longer on the strategic plan. There is no proposal to work on those in 2025 unless that comes forward from directors as part of your strategic planning process.
I have Director Getness.
Thanks to the chair. Can I just confirm if all of RS1 lots are in OK Falls and all of RD1 lots are in Naramata?
I'll have to follow up afterwards just to get the full list and see what
Yeah.
electoral areas they're in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because for me, yeah, that's what I was saying before about just doing these 2, the minimum ones. And then I think that's a valid request to bring back those things that were dropped, and we'll figure out strategic planning where we want to put them. But if we're trying to meet the provincial requirements, I think we should do that. But I'm hesitant to speak on behalf of E and D, that's all. But if that's where the majority of the decision needs to be made, then those 2 directors need to make that decision, and then we need to move on with this, I think.
Director Federico?
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, I mean, I'm supportive of that, just looking at the RS1 and RD1 right now. So I'll make a motion then to move that staff look at amending those 2 to be in compliance with the province. Unless anyone wants to add to that. Okay. Yeah, and then from there, have a workshop to look through, or as Director Gittins has mentioned, right, like see where that falls in on strategic planning and how we want to move forward with tackling the rest of it. Because really for me, setbacks is not a high priority. So if that gets bumped a few years, I won't be sad. And then revision of Naramata Village Center stuff, like I don't even know what's included in that to be able to comment on it. So if there can be a breakdown on what that looks like, then I can make further comment on support or not support, and can bring that forward to the APC for further conversation. So yeah, I'll make that motion now.
So we have something motioned and seconded. CAO, can I just do a quick, we've talked about the minimum requirements, but in the letter, is it your understanding that what we're proposing right now would meet the minimum requirements to satisfy that, the letter? Because I believe this is the second letter we've received now for that particular issue?
That's correct. Mr. Garish, it would be.
Mr. Garish?
Yes.
Yeah, that's my understanding. And so, based on the direction today, I think what we're proposing is to come back to committee to show you what this bylaw could look like. And if it's just dealing with the RS1 and RD1 zones, then it could be quick to turn around, which would then let us respond to the province to indicate that we are trying to move forward to achieve compliance.
Oh, go ahead, Director Giddens.
Thanks. And just final question. And then would this still allow the exemption letter for Westminster to be included in this, or would that come at a different time?
So my understanding is that if the bylaw is simply dealing with RD1 and RS1, that at that point that bylaw is adopted, then we are in compliance and we have to notify the province of that. And so we have to send them a copy of our bylaws to show them what we've done. And as part of that, we would say, except for the West Bench. And the reason for that is because of the geotechnical concerns. So that would all be done at the same time.
So I have one further follow-up with CAO. We're using the strategic priority planning, whatever we're officially calling it. Do we need a motion? So the one that we have is what would be required to do what we're meeting here today to do?
Yes.
And potentially give some forward steps. We could workshop, and that doesn't need to be a motion either? We can just.
That's correct.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't missing any steps. So I think if everyone, is there anyone that, given the proposed that we have now, I think looked like kind of unanimous, but I want to give anyone else that would still like to speak to the motion. Then we'll call, hold on, am I allowed to do that? Yep. Oh, call the question, all those in favor? And any opposed? Looks unanimous, that carries. So then, motion to adjourn, is that that was the big one for today? Okay, I'm just, there was a lot here, so I just want to make sure I'm not missing it. Right? So call for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Yep, motion and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? And we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wiebe, and I believe that does it for the day. So thank you, everybody, for your patience, and good job.